Hello and welcome to the 16th SingaporeConnect COVID-19 Forum. For those of you joining us for the first time, SingaporeConnect is a San Francisco Bay Area-based volunteer-run overseas Singaporean group which was started about 20 years ago. Since March 15th this year, SingaporeConnect has been facilitating these community updates on the evolving COVID-19 situation in partnership with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Singapore Global Network. We've also had special guest subject matter experts from our community. In our previous sessions, we've addressed the impact of COVID-19 on personal and professional topics like COVID-19 prevention, the search for the COVID-19 cure, mental health during shelter-in-place, the U.S.-Singapore visa situation, job opportunities in Singapore, education, Singaporean Bay Area restaurants, as well as cooking Singapore food at home. Hello and welcome to the 16th SingaporeConnect COVID-19 Forum. Today, in our 16th session, we will be featuring Wukong Fan, which comprises of Jiezhen Wu, founder of the Possibility Playbook, a leadership coaching organization, and Jared Kong, general manager of Gush Cloud International, a leading influencer and talent management company. They will be sharing their perspectives on life, love, and everything in between, and share practical tips on how they celebrate and strengthen their relationships in a time of corona while continuing to stay at home. Their discussion today will be in two parts.
Who is a female member of the Wukong Fan, and then Jared, you can see them now on the screen as well. And Jiezhen is actually the founder of the Possibility Playbook, and Jared is the GM of Gush Cloud. So let's take a moment to learn more about you guys. Jiezhen?
Hi, Jasmine. Thanks so much for inviting us to be here today and to share more about this topic. I think, we're not going to spend too much time on my LinkedIn profile. I think tonight is really, I think about everyone else, and we want to be of help and service. Just a bit about me. You can always look us up later. We're not going to spend too much time on us exactly, but more about what we've learned and what might be helpful to folks. I think we're going to speak about this from a professional point of view and also a personal point of view. Just because I think we're whole beings, and we often think we can separate the two, but we're going to share a bit tonight about why that might not necessarily be the case. Just to share a bit before we take the screen share off, so you can we can see everyone's faces and connect with folks. We're going to be, the first half of tonight's session will be about, sharing about professional relationships, how we can strengthen them during this time of COVID and everyone staying at home and remote work and everything being online. So we're going to talk about LinkedIn, social media, Zoom as a whole. And then, personal relationships will be the second part about, deepening connections and also celebrating love in this time and how we can strengthen our relationships during this time. So if you could take the screen share off. There's no more slides right after this. Yeah.
No.
Great. Perfect. Thank you.
Everybody.
We just thought we'd start by introducing ourselves. I'm Jiezhen.
I'm Jared. Nice to meet everybody.
And in terms of, I think our background and experience, so I've worked in the social media space, so has Jared for a while, in different segments of it. I was looking a lot more at how we can use social media for social impact, and Jared works, and he'll tell you a bit about himself as well in a second. But I think while we're doing that, we just want to get a sense of who's in the room. And, you could have been anywhere else on this Saturday evening.
On the long weekend.
Or Sunday morning for those folks calling in from Singapore. But I think we really want to know, why you're here. You could be anywhere else, and what you hope to get out of this session, so we make it as relevant and as, applicable for you. And yeah, as Mark said, if you're okay, turn on your video, but we also get it, sometimes it's like I'm lying in bed and I don't want to turn on the video. So we get it, but I think that's actually for tip one, if you for Zoom, is try to get everyone in your meetings to turn on the video. It really increases engagement and allows people to be present and not like cooking at the same time and stuff while you're trying to like have a great conversation. So if you could just start, while just chatting into the chat, why you're here and what you hope to get out of the session, so we make it as relevant for you as possible. So whether you have questions or just like one word, about what you'd like us to talk about or focus on, then we can zoom in on that.
We want to let you take something away from this time that you've been so gracious to grant us, and I think time is the greatest gift that you can give anybody, and you've granted us your time here, so we want to make it as worthwhile for everybody as possible.
Yeah.
So if you could just type in the chat, why you're here, what made you sort of spend this time on this Saturday evening or Sunday morning, wherever you're calling in from, with us. I think it'll be really awesome for us to also know, and that way whatever we share and we talk about will hopefully have greater resonance and relevance to you.
Great, I'll get started while folks are putting their entries in here. I, for one, am working from home now, so I spend a lot of my time online. And because I run a company, I have basically a public presence as well as a personal presence, right? There's the public side of me that needs to make official announcements, blogs, and all that. And then I'm on the company website as well as this at home, so I have a personal profile I need to maintain. Then, of course, on a personal side, I have a lot of family and connections. I typically use Facebook. I haven't figured out how to use Instagram properly, I think. I don't know about some of the other tools that folks use, like TikTok or anything else. So I suppose I'm dating myself at the same time. But I definitely use LinkedIn a lot as part of my instrument, and Zoom a lot too. So I'm always very curious about tips and tricks, right? Such as lighting, or what to wear better, or how to behave online, because I have the same issue I was telling Jiezhen about folks in my company, especially since we're now all working from home. I want to ensure we maintain a minimum level of professionalism online. While I don't want folks to be wearing suits, they should not be maybe in t-shirts with like mega logos, right? Or words that may be offensive. So there may be some guidelines that companies are sending out to their team members these days from a professional level. And maybe there's some things that are unspoken that would cause my colleagues to have a certain impression about me that I don't want them to have. So that's one part. And then as a leader of my company, I'm concerned about the conversations we're having, because in the past, when we had offices, we would be able to do water cooler conversations. We would be able to hang out with each other and ask how you're doing. But now, we got to find ways to mimic and to have that water cooler conversation online, right? So how does one actually do that? How does one keep the energy, the culture of the company active? And so these are some of those questions I have around the professional aspect of Zoom.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Jazz, for sharing that. And, just to make sure that we touch on the stuff that you're interested in as well, you can also chat in. I think some people have chatted in some of their, their questions and stuff. If you could just put like a couple of sentences about what you said, so we make sure that we get back to that, that'd be great. But thanks for sharing that, because actually Jasmine has been reaching out to me a couple of times saying, can we talk about Zoom presence? Because I think it's something that every organization is facing right now, especially those who were very used to that in-person interaction and connection. So whether it's at work or even personally, even how can we use Zoom for community or family during this time, I think will be really important. So, I'm just looking at, some really interesting questions, requests coming into the chat. I think people are interested, just to sum it up, about Zoom presence. Just curious, LinkedIn in particular, how we can use LinkedIn, which we'll be talking about as well. Using LinkedIn for networking, just overall tips in particular. Doing a lot of public speaking. Definitely have been doing that, and I'll share a bit about that as well. Personal branding, as well as online identities and presence. I think crafting, we can talk about that, online identities and presence, as well as multitasking with kids.
And we have someone who's on SHN right now.
Lisa calling in from Ritz-Carlton, right? So SHN, glad you could join us today. And I think getting over the room really silent. Ooh, that's a really interesting question, and I have a response for that as well. Cool. So let's start. I mean, Jared, do you want to talk a bit about your work and your background and what you think about?
Sure, happy to. So I think like many of us, we kind of been thrust into this era of and way of working. But my background, I think just before we kind of jump into that, so I head up the US operations for Gush Cloud International. So for those of you that know Gush Cloud, a Singaporean founded company, founders are both Singaporean, and we work predominantly in the social media influencer space and content creator space, as they're known here in the US. So we really look at, on one level, connecting brands with content creators, but we also look at, discovering talent on the social media space that we can groom, represent, and really take to the world stage, because Gush Cloud now is an international company with offices around the world. So my work is very much in the social media space. I'm not a social media influencer myself. I have passions that relate to entertainment, music, predominantly being one of them. But it's just kind of like been an interesting way to coalesce the things that I'm interested in and be working in this entertainment space, while it being sort of like new media and social media. So that's my background. I'm a lawyer by training. So I head up our business and legal affairs here. And I was previously legal counsel at Zook before I moved over to the US to be where I am now. And Jiezhen can tell you a little bit more about what she was doing before and Possibility Project. Yeah, and then we can dive into the stuff about Zoom.
Yeah, for sure. So hi everyone, I'm Jiezhen. I actually just moved to California earlier this summer. For the last year, I was based on the East Coast in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I was an Equity Inclusion Fellow at Harvard. So I look a lot at like how we can create more inclusive organizations, inclusive leaders in organizations, in the workplace, so that everyone can thrive. And it was great time, but I must say I'm also enjoying a lot of the nature here in California. And prior to that, I was running a social enterprise and a media platform back in Asia called The Hidden Good. And we worked a lot with organizations to create their social impact narratives, leadership narratives. So I'm really about the narratives, which is what I'm going to share a bit about today in crafting, I think your online presence as well as your offline presence, because I think it all needs to be coherent. So because in Singapore, we like not what's the acronym, abbreviations.
Oh yes,
yeah. So I've got the ABCs today for you, for strengthening this online presence as well as professional relationships. So A stands for authenticity. And I'll tell you what the B is in a second. But I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to creating an online presence, is creating an authentic online presence, because I think people can really see very quickly if what you're putting out online is not who you are and it doesn't add up. Like it's like, some people say, oh my God, I'm like this, they try to be this person. And then when you meet them in a Zoom call, they're like completely different. And I don't know how many of you have experienced that before. Like people say, you think people are one thing and then you meet them and it's like, wow, that did not add up. Yeah. And that is really where you erode trust. And I think the biggest thing that we have, as currency in business, in relationships in general, is trust. So you really want to make sure that you're showing up in a way that people get you. And, I think Jared and I have, whether we're online or in person, that's something that's really important. So, just not don't feel like you have to be something that you're not. Don't feel like you have to be like this super, enthusiastic extrovert person, because that's what you see other people doing, right? I think Zoom and the online space has actually given a lot more people who are a bit more reticent, maybe a bit more introverted, ways to engage and participate by using the chat groups, the chat room, by using participant raise hand buttons. The breakout rooms are also a great way where you can engage.
Even the reactions.
Reactions like this. Jared just put up a thumb reaction, so you can feel free to test this stuff out. This is a safe and brave space where you can test, an experiment. But I think it takes time to kind of carve out what that real self looks like for you online and offline, and making sure that that it adds up. So that's that's the A. The B is being intentional. I think being intentional with the way you're reaching out to people, even online, right? So some people have asked about LinkedIn networking. I think right now, and Jared will speak about LinkedIn in a second and why he loves it so much as a platform. But LinkedIn, the fact that everyone is home right now, the majority of the world, I would say, is working from home or doing some kind, even Singapore is like half in office, half not. A lot of people are actually a lot more accessible.
Yes.
I think you used to have a really hard time chasing down like CEOs or like people that used to be traveling or not, but now people cannot travel. So like a lot of people are grounded in their homes and they're happy to connect. But I think being intentional about how you reach out and why you reach out is really important, and it's not a numbers game really. I think when it comes to networking and also about like followers, but you want quality and over quantity. You want people that will be your super fans as opposed to like 10,000 people who don't really know you. But yeah, be intentional. Do you have something else to add?
Just to add on to the intentionality piece, I think just knowing that I think that's something that I've experienced in the last 6-7 months that we've been working remotely. It took it was a bit of a transition for all of us, including my colleagues, who we were so used to being in the same physical space. The nature of our work also, where we were shooting content for some content creators, required us to be with them, different locations, etc. But then when we immediately kind of very abruptly went to remote working, because I remember this very clearly, it was sometime in March when the shelter-in-place orders were first implemented, and we've been working remotely since for the last 6 months, 7 months or so. There was definitely that transition and that need to feel like you needed to be somewhere, or like getting used to the fact that you could be working from anywhere, and particularly from home. But I think that point about access was something that I noticed very, very quickly and very early on during this whole work from home thing, which was that people that I found it very difficult to contact or reach, or even just set up like in-person meetings with, like they couldn't really have an excuse now. It's like you should be at home, take my call, like pick up my call, or like let's arrange that meeting. And I found that I actually had greater access to some people who I didn't have as much access to previously. And that was sort of like a silver lining thing, to this whole work from home period. So that was that point that I wanted to just sort of like elaborate on a little bit.
And I think just being intentional about how we use these platforms as well, because Zoom fatigue is real, guys. I'm sure you spend a lot more time on screens than maybe you normally would. So if we're gonna take people's time, right, online, how do we really want to use it? So whether it's meetings as a big organization, maybe you're doing a town hall, or you want to do like one-on-one meetings, like how do you give people like the value and have them not feel exhausted but recharge from the experience as well. But the reason why it's like be intentional is because intentionality is a way of being. It's not really like a doing like a task that you check off, intentional, like but it's something that I think a way that we approach conversations, even just how we use spaces, like how we kind of frame certain literally framing, like even right now we chose this spot in our home pretty intentionally today in terms of where we want to sit. We'll go into like tips in a second, like actual tips, but in terms of Zoom, so you can see like, you can see kind of like fairy lights in the background with like, I don't know, and you can kind of see like these two like lines. So generally if you're making like YouTube videos also, right, it's called framing. But basically, if this was a work call, like a more serious call, I would probably choose a plain background, similar to maybe what like David is kind of using. Although David's kind of backlit, you can see there's like light at the back of his head. You want light in the front of your face.
David's gonna move now.
David's like, but David has a pretty plain background, or even Jasmine has like, she's chosen a pretty neutral background.
And she's framed
but
her,
because this is like, I'm choosing to intentionally create this as a more of like a personal, intimate, fireside chat type space. I'll talk about Zoom backgrounds in a second. Some people, so it's really up to you, right? You can actually choose a background that's, I would say for a generic, like if the first time you're meeting someone, it depends on what you're trying to be intentional about, right? Am I trying to show you a piece of who I am? In that case, like, someone like Daryl has the bookcase, that's like such a good talking point. Be like, oh, Daryl, do you really like reading? Is that why you got so many books? You can have it as a conversation point. But if you're really trying to be very neutral, having a plain background like helps. But you gotta ask yourself, like, what am I trying to communicate with this? So there are sometimes I actually change positions in the house depending on where I sit. I have a corner that I use in the corner of our living room when I do a lot of the public speaking. I've been giving a lot of talks and sitting on panels the last couple of weeks, and I have this like corner so no one's walking behind me. It's not distracting, but it kind of gives you a glimpse of like who I am. There's like this like Chinese lamp there, which I don't know. I feel very proud of my Asian roots.
And then on the back end of things, I help set up the ring light for her.
Yeah. So
I'm like the production assistant.
Show you what's behind us.
Yeah, so you can see a
you
little.
You can see there's like this black circle. This thing is called a ring light. You don't really need it unless you're doing a lot of like
we just had an extra
professional
set from
recording
work, and so
or a lot of like online speaking, but it helps if you're super backlit in bright light and stuff. But just being intentional, like sometimes I'll turn it on. Like I did a talk for Facebook last week on the future of community, and it was like 6 or 7 o'clock. It was like a weird hour where the sun was going to set, and then like the lighting was just off in the house, so we used that. But you don't necessarily need it. You can also buy very cheap ones on Amazon. You can just put on your table, and those help to like light your face as well. But anyways, just being intentional about that, I think is it helps to craft what you want to create. But again, going back to being authentic, I think being real about how you show up, all this technical stuff actually doesn't make that much of like a difference if you are not showing up for
as who you are
in the in the interaction, right?
Exactly.
And
the C.
Yes. So authentic, be intentional, coherence. Do you want to talk about a bit of coherence across platforms and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think social media has been a growing a field or type of a way that we communicate ourselves to the world, a form of communication, and there's a myriad of platforms out there these days. Started with Facebook. You've got Instagram, you've got YouTube, you've got long form, short form platforms, TikTok, Triller. Will TikTok be around in 10 days? Who knows, right? But like there's basically social media platforms that are coming out every single day or every single week. And at the end of the day, it's not about the what, but it's the how and the why, right? Like how are you communicating yourself or communicating who you are on these platforms? And I think while there might be different nuances between different platforms, at the end of the day, coherence is important because you want to be communicating who you are in a coherent and aligned fashion across all the different social media platforms. Granted, certain social media platforms will be used for different things. LinkedIn, of course, is done in a more professional, for more professional purposes. You're connecting work. You might be doing business. You might be building your professional network on that platform. But who you are on LinkedIn shouldn't stray too far, or shouldn't be different from who you are, on Facebook or Instagram or any other platform that is communicating your identity and who you are, who you want to sort of show the world.
Yeah, because chances are, if someone's looking you up on LinkedIn, they're probably looking you up elsewhere as well. Whether they're Googling you or looking you up on Instagram. I mean, that's the world that we live in today. And rather than have your digital footprint, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to like invest into it. But the problem is that if you don't create your own narrative and your own footprint, someone is going to create it for you. Yeah. And so they'll connect the dots in their brain, right? Like, oh, I see this here. So rather than having that void there that someone kind of can like make their own assumptions, you kind of like want to give people enough of like who you are, what's important to you, so that they kind of get where you're coming from. And yeah, so I think, but it's not that you use every platform the same way. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think you want to be intentional, and you don't have to be on every single platform. Like, I think you want to choose the platform that makes sense for your industry, for your interests. Like, if it's very, very tiring for you to use a platform, right? It's probably not the right platform, because it's meant to be social and fun. Maybe choose one or two that you like using, that you can kind of play around with, and have fun with. I think a lot of times we feel like we have to do it. It's the same thing with networking. When you feel like you have to network, it's like a pain, right? Yeah. But if you see networking as a way to kind of connect with people, build deeper relationships, make friends,
have interesting
conversations, it becomes a lot more enjoyable. So don't have this feel like it has to be another thing on your to-do list. But maybe just have fun with like, okay, so how do I want to present myself to the world? And rather than people making certain assumptions about me, why don't I just try and like craft this narrative, an authentic narrative of who I am, and sharing things that are important to me. So yeah, a thing about, just coherence is using the platforms, and I can talk about the platforms, and if you have any particular platform, I know people have said LinkedIn in particular, but any other platforms you're interested in, we're happy to talk more about that. But today's not just about social media as well. But basically, like for I think one key distinction between Facebook and LinkedIn is just who you have on your platform, who is in your network. So Jared and I actually have different approaches. Jared adds everyone that that you
if anyone wants to connect,
request, right?
I mean, I would obviously screen whether it's a it's a real person or it's a bot or something, but I haven't had any bad experiences on LinkedIn. I think most people that want to connect or reach out to connect, I would accept the connection, and this is just my approach. Because
I tend to be a bit more like
that could be a conversation that could happen downstream, but everyone uses it differently, of course.
Yeah, so like for me, I tend to use LinkedIn a bit more like, is this person like someone that I might want to connect with? Like, do I feel like we have common interests? Like, that's why I think when you want to add someone on LinkedIn, using the message function that goes along the invitation is really helpful. Because like, even if I've never met someone, right, and they send me a nice message, it's like, hey, it could be super general. It could be like, hey, I just thought your profile is really interesting. I'd love to connect. Someone from like Philippines last week sent me this. Like, I came across one of your videos. I thought on like one of your TED Talks or something, and then like I really thought I thought we had a lot of similar interests. I would love to connect. I am much more likely to accept that person over like some random request that came. I just see the person's name, and if their profile is very empty, then I'm like, oh my god, who's this stranger? Like I think especially, I don't know, for me, I'm also speaking as like a woman, because I've got like some inappropriate requests on LinkedIn as well, so I'm a bit more cautious here. Sorry, Jared, no one hit on you on LinkedIn.
No. I haven't had that problem, so.
No, but generally no. But for real, I think it's adding a message.
No, for sure.
Especially if you're trying to reach someone that maybe you're not sure whether they will what their personal policy is, because I do think different people have different policies on who they accept on LinkedIn. Yeah. Sending a message, and you can see this when you click connect on LinkedIn. You can add like a little
like how do we know each other,
along with it. So those are I think just ways to make it more personal and more intentional, rather than you just add click everyone. So Facebook, I actually only, so my personal like kind of line is on Facebook. I don't add anyone I haven't met, like in person or like online. Like, I have to have met the person. But on LinkedIn, if someone sends me a message like this, like, oh, I saw one of your talks, or oh, I saw your profile, it's quite interesting. Like, I would love to connect, and I've never met this person before, I'm much more likely to accept this person. As a connection, and then continue that conversation, as opposed to like Facebook, where I really do not add anyone like, I don't know. And I think in terms of what you post as well, right? The distinction between Facebook and LinkedIn is like, for Facebook, you use a lot of more personal things, like family things, but for instance, when I'm giving a talk, I usually post it on Facebook and on LinkedIn as well. But maybe I might write it a little bit differently, because you want to think, again, being intentional about what message you're trying to get across. And I think being intentional about being real about like what you're saying. I think a lot of people really have low tolerance for like humble bragging. If you're going to post it, just own it. I think that's the the piece. And I'm sure you've also seen a lot of posts maybe on LinkedIn that catch more attention are those things that share stories,
or learning,
or
good
insights. Like,
yeah.
Posting about yourself all the time is not going to necessarily garner as much traction as maybe posting about article you found interesting, or an interaction you had with someone. Jared loves LinkedIn because I think it's one of the few social media platforms there where the organic growth is very, it's very rapid.
The reach is very, I mean, if I were to kind of juxtapose it or sort of liken it to a social platform maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, I feel like LinkedIn is kind of at the place where with what Facebook was maybe in like 2011 or 2012, in that, something that you post, especially if it's something that is from you, it could be a point of insight, or something that you learn, that you generally want to put out to share and to have that knowledge exchange. Those posts or those articles that you write I think the algorithm is at that stage where it's really, it could potentially reach like a vast number of people. than if you were to share it necessarily on your Facebook or Instagram or otherwise. Just because I think the people that are on LinkedIn are really just there, like people like myself. I go on LinkedIn not just to build more professional connections, but I'm actually there to it's a great source of knowledge and information. So a lot of journals that I follow, for example, or news outlets or like think tanks or just influential thinkers, people like Seth Godin, post regularly every day. He posts something, and there's always like a nugget of wisdom that he shares, that I find meaningful to just be part of my professional work day, right? Just to get some new insight. So I really think more than just a platform for networking and building network. LinkedIn is a fantastic source for
and just so LinkedIn, I think in terms of notifications that people can see when they'll get notifications you like something, when you share something, so it's every step that you take online, going back to the B, right? Being intentional. Know that it's crafting like this image or perception that people have of you. So like whether you share a post or you like a page, you're saying congratulations to a friend, a lot of those things that might not necessarily show on Facebook anymore as notifications will show up on LinkedIn. And people see your activity a lot more on on LinkedIn than they do on Facebook now. So just because of the numbers and the way the algorithm is shaped. But so using it as a way, so not just what you put on your profile, but the actions that you're taking on LinkedIn actually craft this whole perception of who you are and the way people perceive you. I just want to touch on some some questions here that people have in the chat before, and we're going to wrap up with some tips on Zoom, and then we're going to move to part 2 on personal relationships as well. So should you be careful about potential competitors gaining access to your network on LinkedIn? I mean, yes and no. I think honestly, if we're worried a lot about competition and people seeing it's kind of like ideas. I'm sure you've met some startup founders that refuse to tell you what the idea is, but actually it's not that the idea is super revolutionary, but we hold things too closely to ourselves. And I think when we have this mindset of oh no, someone's going to steal something, that's when people actually, when we spend a lot of our energy guarding things as opposed to I think expanding it and kind of giving away. So I mean, if they do gain access to your network and all these people, at the end of the day, it's the person with the better relationship. Going back to relationships, the person that has gained their trust. Absolutely. The person that they find more authentic, that they can connect with, who they want to work with, that is going to walk away with a deal at the end of the day, or a long-standing relationship. So
and actually, just to jump on that point, the way it works is very interesting on LinkedIn as well. The posts that tend to do better and get more engagement, people commenting, people sharing their posts, a lot of it comes from because that person who originated the post was looking to give something away. Which is kind of an interesting thing. It's
and I'm trying to find the thing.
They're not trying to gain anything. They share knowledge, or they share information, or they ask a question for the purposes of sharing and giving that insight.
And I think that's the thing about LinkedIn, a lot of these platforms, is that the more you give, the more you get. Yes. And so I wouldn't worry too much about people gaining access to your network, because if you have that stronger relationship and you've built that trust and credibility, you got nothing to worry about.
I'd like to add as well, in this world, oftentimes I find that some competitors today may be my colleagues tomorrow, or
exactly.
reach out to them, right?
And exactly. And I think never closing the door to collaboration or coming together, especially in this time. A lot of the world's complex solutions are not going to be solved by one party, Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that's a great point. I think some people had questions also about reaching out to interviewers
after an interview, over LinkedIn,
networking for a new job. I think this is really about your comfort level and what your experience with the interviewer was. Sometimes, I think it might be good to just stay on the platform that you were, whether it's email, because I think it really depends on the culture of the company and learning to read that. I think networking for a job. So right now, if you see, and I'm still playing around with this on LinkedIn, there's an open to work, and you can put what types of industries you're interested in. And a lot of people have actually reached out to me of different opportunities. So if that's something that, you're looking for a new opportunity, that's a great place to like kind of put yourself out there. I think at first I was like, oh, you know, what will it look like, right? You know, if you're going to like put this stuff out there. But I think you'll never know until you try. And it's like in experimenting with this stuff in a way that's real for you, that helps to actually build, you know, this larger picture of who you are and the ways in which people should expect to interact with you as well.
Actually, I want to add as well as that as an employer, and I have also recruited at PricewaterhouseCoopers when I was working there in consulting, it's very common and almost an expectation that we expect our people coming in our interviews to already have done research on us, meaning that I expect that they would have gone to my LinkedIn profile to take a look at my profile and try to find ways to connect with me. Because if they don't even do this basic research, how would I know that they would have this sort of initiative when they actually are on my team, right? To look to connect with others. I actually look and appreciate folks who do their research ahead of time. So I don't feel like stalking people in this time and age. I feel like they are smart in terms of leveraging tools because my LinkedIn profile is public and I expect people to be able to use that to be able to connect with me and identify with my interests. So I totally expect them to connect with me after the interview or after I have a, you know, like I talk to another executive in another company, I totally expect to reach out and they expect themselves to reach out to me almost immediately after our interaction so we can stay in touch. This world is about networking in the business world. You take every opportunity to connect with folks either before or after the meeting. And that just shows that you're on top of things.
Yeah, so I think generally a good, so right now, as we're going back earlier, a lot of people are really interested. I think open, this is my experience and Jared's experience in particular, you know, just that people are a lot more open to connecting, you know, using that as an opportunity, but also before you have these, whether it's informational interviews or you just want to have a chat, you know, using LinkedIn to make sure that, you know, you don't ask them questions that are already like obviously there, like, oh, where do you go to school? Like, I mean, unless you have a reason for asking that and you want to use it as a talking point. But, you know, using it to just get a sense, like a quick sense of someone, obviously is not going to be, or you can, you know, point to a certain part, like, oh, I noticed that you worked in like the transportation department. Like, can you tell me more about what that was like? You know, using it as a way to create conversation. LinkedIn has been a great place for that, you know, and I think,
I'd also like to, sorry if I may add, LinkedIn is also a good way to do research to ensure you don't fall into any traps. I had one interviewee come into the room claiming in his profile he could speak German. And he actually even mentioned it, I speak German. I'm like, awesome. So then I started speaking German back to him, which he should have known from my profile because it's my third language. And he was stumped, right? So why would you invite that on yourself if you had already done the research, right? It's kind of like you saying, I can speak Mandarin, and then, you know, this person actually, you know,
again back to the authentic, you know, that don't put things on your profile that you cannot do, please. Like, you know, like go,
it's like
don't be like, oh, I can juggle, and then like you show up and you just
and then you meet someone who's actually able to juggle and juggle better than you. You know what I mean? Like that is just, you know. But
no, so I think it's a great way to just kind of do a quick, like, very public background check on someone, but a great way to follow up after meetings as well. And like, I would love to stay connected.
And find commonality, like going back to what Jasmine said, you know, like common interests, you know, and not just from the point of you know, just necessarily just being able to make conversation, but if you're just genuinely you're able to connect with someone else because you have that shared interest, that's just all the better and benefit.
And so I think, you know, I think Janice asking, did she use LinkedIn if you're not looking for a job? And I would definitely think so. I think it's a way for you to stay abreast of issues in your industry,
for sure. Get
plugged into new spaces as well, connect with people that are outside your space. Not just because it's for your next job, but it could open other opportunities. I've had some really great conversations from like random people reaching out to me and like, you know, just connecting with them at a human level. They could even become your next friend, like, you know, especially I think adult friendships are a whole nother world. We can talk about that another time. But like, you know, I think it and finding that shared interest, because I think especially in the world we live in today, where a lot of us as human beings, we're still looking for real connections, you know, like we want to walk away from relationships feeling nourished and recharged and not feel like someone's just out to get something from us. So I think generally giving, sharing in this space really helps to build up not just, you know, your online brand and a personal brand, but really just
build those, you know, like relationships, right? Like that, and not just connections or professional networking just because, you know, just to say that, oh, I've met so and so. It's really like I really want to get to know this person for the person that he or she is.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think so, going back to, LinkedIn, personal branding, your online presence, what you share, what you choose to post, who you choose to connect with, how you connect. This is all what, I think that personal brand is about, because your personal brand is not just what you put out there, but what people say about you when you're not in the room as well. How people see you, how people remember you. So remember, again, there's that quote, it's not just what you say, but also how you make people feel. But I think how you make people feel through the words that you post, but also through the interaction. So yeah, I think we spoke a lot about that. I just want to close this section with some quick tips about Zoom and Zoom presence. So as I mentioned just now, you want to make sure that, you're front lit and not backlit. Obviously sometimes it's harder, but you can try to just play around with light in your house. Right now, the light that is lighting our faces is our kitchen light. It's not like we're not using any ring lights tonight. If this helps, and I know this might sound really weird, if you can stick a sticker next to your webcam. If this is how when I'm actually having like a one-on-one conversation, I look like I'm actually looking into your eyes and making eye contact. The problem with Zoom and online spaces that you cannot make eye contact. But right now I'm staring right into the camera, and this is what I look like when I'm staring at the screen. I know you can tell there's a difference, but it really looks like, if you have an extended conversation with someone, right now I'm looking at the screen, right now I'm looking at the camera, you can stick a sticker next to the camera on your phone to kind of remind you to look there and not look at the keyboard or like elsewhere, so that you can maintain that level of engagement. Generally, as much as possible, try to keep your videos on. I know it's like very annoying because they got to look nice, got like, make sure that the background is not too messy, but it helps you stay engaged and it helps everyone else on the call stay engaged as well. So actually setting norms for your organization, for your teams, for whatever groups you're usually part of, setting the norm where it's not the exception that your camera is on, but setting it as like, oh, this is the expected thing. Obviously, sometimes we get it. If your camera is off, really helps to increase the engagement as well. What else? I talked about backgrounds already. So Zoom, someone asked about virtual backgrounds. I think it's great if it's not distracting. So if you look at Mark's background, it's not very distracting. It says SingaporeConnect is relevant, But then there's some people that like to put the like moving backgrounds. I don't know if you've seen, like someone was doing like, there was
gets a bit like
okay, you want to show some virtual backgrounds?
I mean, so like I use one virtual background, and I mean it's kind of again going back to what Jiezhen said, as a conversation starter, right? So I have one which is like my office.
You can download these for free, by the way.
Yeah.
Is it working?
Is it working?
Hang
there
on.
we go. So
yeah, so this is
my virtual office.
Everyone.
Yeah. And then of course, like depending if you're having like, fun phone calls with family, I have like one which is the Simpsons living room. But that's about it. I don't really use virtual backgrounds.
You got your Zoom one as well.
Yeah, and I have my Zoom one as well.
Yeah, so you can like play around virtual backgrounds if it's a fun call, but I'd say sometimes they can be a bit distracting. Yeah. And also if you're trying to come across as, it really depends on, again, being intentional about what kind of message you're trying to send. If you want to have like a fun call, sure, put like some fun background. But if you're trying to like have a serious, like really grounded conversation, you don't want things distracting from who you are and what you're trying to say. So yeah, yep. I think that's it before we hop over just to the personal side. So yeah, I think, and again, Zoom, and I'm happy to talk about virtual facilitation as well. It is a skill that I think we need in navigating this online space, but don't only stay in main rooms if you have the option to use breakout rooms. And I'm happy to chat about that offline as well. But to practice, before we switch over to the, about personal relationships, do you have anything else to add before I close this section?
No, the only thing I want to say is just that this is here to stay. I think these, this way of working and this way of communicating with colleagues, business partners, working over projects, it's all going to happen in this form and format, at least for a while to come. So it's good that, to actually take some time to, be informed, like actually practice some of these, Zoom etiquette or ways of, being on this platform, because this is going to be here to stay for a while.
Yeah. So I think don't worry too much about it. Just have fun with it and experiment and see what works for you. What we shared today here might work for your industry. It might, it might be something that you play around with and find what works for your organization. But don't get too stuck on like one way of doing things, because the world is, as we know, it's rapidly changing, right? And I think being more responsive rather than, I think just expecting things to stay the same will help us equip ourselves to move with the times as well. Are there virtual backgrounds for Slack or
Not
Skype?
that I'm aware of. I have not used Skype for many years now, actually. So
there's like Snap Camera, which I don't know. It's like you can use that for Google Hangouts, for Microsoft Teams as well. But it can be really distracting, honestly. Like I had a board meeting the other day, and someone had like a cat on his face. Like it was a virtual like filter. It was fun for a bit, and then after a while, it was like getting a bit distracting. So you want to make sure that you are creating a space in which like people can deepen their connections as opposed to like be disconnected. So I think that will, I think we'll leave it there in terms of the professional online relationships, and I'm happy to chat more. In the interest of online networking and practicing putting these tips into practice, our invitation for you is to put your LinkedIn profiles into the chat, and I'll show you how to do it on Zoom, because you cannot just type in the normal link. You actually have to type HTTPS and then the backslash. I'm going to type in mine so you have an example, and you can, you can, you can copy and paste it and use your own thing. But basically, you can't just type in like LinkedIn.com, like how you might normally do in a WhatsApp chat. So Jiezhen also put hers in there. So feel free to connect and reach out. Just if you do, can you just write, like, practice using the message function. Just be like, hey, we met at SG Connect. That's all you have to write, so that people will know that it's a warm contact and not like some random person adding them on LinkedIn. So invitation to connect. You can also put in other social media platforms. If you have a blog, I think someone wrote to us privately that she's thinking about starting a blog. I think this is a great time to like start testing and putting out content
and chronicling the experience
and just seeing how you like it or how people respond. There's really no harm in putting things out that are true for you, that are authentic. People can fight over all the like, I think facts, what are facts, right? But no one can fight with what your experience is. So as long as you're speaking from your experience, a lot of that stuff is real and justified and true. So feel free to put your LinkedIn links in, and then we're going to switch over to talking about personal relationships and keeping relationships, keeping your marriage alive, staying in touch with family during this time. So we'll give you a second to do that.
And if you guys have more questions, you can post them out there so that
please.
Jiezhen and Jared move into the next segment. If there's a question comes up, we can always deal with it maybe at the end of.
So thanks for your questions. For the first section, about your online presence, LinkedIn, professional relationships. And we're going to talk a bit now, just switching gears a bit. Everyone, let's take a breath. Let's take a collective breath, as we shift. Now exhale. It's great to also create pauses. So just now, Jasmine was actually talking about how like now you don't have water cooler conversations anymore, because it's like you're in the meeting and you're out. We have to actually create these like times for spontaneity, for connections. So the chat is actually a great place to do that, depending on the type of meeting you're having. But also creating these pauses in conversations when you need to switch gears. It's possible. But just giving people time to like switch and move as you maybe change the topic, or, kind of helping people bookmark what might seem as like this fluid, kind of like ambiguous time that they spend online. So giving people time to settle, I think is important. But anyways, personal relationships. So just a bit about us personally, since we shared about our professional backgrounds. We've been together for about 10 years now, I think. Right? 10-ish. We met in 2010.
9.5 years together.
And we married for 3.
Married for 3.
And I spent about 8 years in the US prior, and then we both just moved back to the US about a year ago. And so our families are back in Singapore. Our parents, Jared's parents, my parents, back in Singapore. My brother's in New York. My sister is currently in Singapore, but potentially moving to Switzerland where her fiance is. So like my family is kind of like just spread, potentially going to be
And
spread
my brother
again.
is back in Singapore as well. So
And his wife, yeah.
yeah.
So, you know, I think we are all living, and I'm sure a lot of us still have family back home, or some are home and family is here. You know, it's just, this is I think the time that we live in now, the fact that we can live, work, play around the world, that sometimes you're going to end up, and we did long distance for
about 3 years.
3 years as well, in the early years that we were dating. So I think this whole idea of like how to stay connected while apart is really important, but also how to stay connected even like when we're all at home.
Yes.
Like, you know, I mean, I love Jared, but I was kind of worried when we're going to be like stuck at home for like extended periods of times, like what this is going to be. Like we spent extended periods of time together before. Like I think we went on a camper van road trip. Last year, we took a train.
We did the Trans-Siberian
Railway, and I was stuck in a small cabin with him for like several days.
And a fellow cabin mate as well.
This like big Russian guy named Andre. But anyways, so, you know, even though we spent like, you know, extended periods of time and like stuck together, COVID is different, right? I think, you know, this has been longer than I think a lot of us might have anticipated. We actually looked at the graphs earlier about how long we thought stay in place is going to continue. And so I think rather than, you know, I think getting frustrated with the camping, which is real, I think I feel it as well. It's also an opportunity for us to think about how we can use this time to strengthen our personal relationships, whether that's with family, our spouses, partners, children, housemates, or even family that's back home. So yeah, you want to share a bit about how you've been doing that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, so we live with two housemates, and they're friends from college actually, and one of them is also a colleague of mine, and we both work for Gush Cloud. But I think, so Jiezhen only moved over to LA about 3 months ago. And so before that, we were living on both sides of the US. She was at the East Coast, I was here. And then obviously it did take some time, you know, when we kind of came back together again, you know, on how we could all live together, and not just with the two of us, but with my two housemates. And that's it's really been a great process and a really enjoyable time, you know, building these, again, relationships, focusing on the relationships and how to thrive while sheltering in place, in a sense, during this COVID period. But I think what's really worked for us, and I think is very fundamentally important, is just firstly having that openness and communication. So I know when, you know, before it actually becomes something that's going to be a problem or something that we need to kind of like figure out, you know, Jiezhen would tell me that, you know, she needs, you know, some time we need to go on our daily walks, for example. We need to, you know, spend some time, you know, with the two, just alone of the two of us, away from our housemates, or just at that time with ourselves. Or she will also communicate early that, you know, I think I need some time, you know, to you know, focus on my school, or focus on the classes that I'm taking, or just to do my own thing. And
so I think, yeah, I mean, a lot of it goes back to like communication, right? Of your needs or the lack of your needs. I think that's what happens a lot of times when we expect the other person to like read our mind, and then like, you know, obviously sometimes people are not mind readers, doesn't happen. And then that missed expectation of like, oh, Jared, I thought you said you're going to do the laundry today. And then, you know, like, why don't I just like tell him, Jared, could you do the laundry today? Even how we ask questions sometimes implies an assumption that we think is going to happen. And Jared always calls me out on this. But yeah, I think, you know, it's really, it starts with, you know, communication. And I think going back to what our ABCs earlier apply here as well. You know, those are not just about like online relationships and networking. Authenticity, being intentional, and coherence, I think apply to personal relationships as well. And I think too often we try to separate, which creates a lot of dissonance internally for us as human beings. Like, we are not separate. It's not like you go from work, you can suddenly turn off completely. Some people can, I think. Some people are really good at it. But for the most part, we're, especially now that we are kind of living, working in the same space, it gets messy, right? And like, how do you create healthy boundaries that allow your relationships to thrive, rather than all of it like kind of like becoming this like big thing? And we'll share a bit of things like what we've been doing, and you can either take those or create your own as well. But I think being you know, again, A for authenticity. I think being authentic to the other person about what's really going on and what you need is probably the first step, whether that's, you know, your spouse, your parents, your siblings, housemates as well, having those open and real conversations. It starts with that. And I think being able to, so for instance, like for me, Jared and I don't know if y'all heard of like love languages. I think it's pretty common, but we have very different like love languages, right? Jared's love language is quality time. Mine is not. I think like,
It's evolved.
no, Jared also really likes quality and quantity time. So like if he could, he would want to spend like all his time. I needed more space. Like even when we were dating, I was like, okay, we don't need to talk every single day. Like, we can talk maybe like a few times a week, like maybe like once a week,
every day, yeah.
But yeah, but Jared's the kind of need the one the kind that will message in the morning and night, good morning, good night kind, like that kind, right?
Yeah, I mean that's and it was more so accentuated when when distance comes into
and
equation,
I appreciate that. I think like but it was learning how to like meet each other where we are, right? So like for me, my independence is like really important, even more so now that we're kind of in this very small space and apartment together. So how do we create time that is ours and also create time together? So I think the first thing that we did was actually like coming up with like a schedule of like when we want it to be together and when we want it like our own time and space. I think is for those who join the NDP celebration, Jared DJs for fun. So every weekend he kind of spends a few hours working on music. He just released a new mix today, so he kind of spends like that time doing that, and I'll spend that time doing other things. But then when we're together, we're really like fully present and together. I think for us, meal times, and this kind of started with my family back home. Like when we're having meals, like phones are off on airplane mode. Like we just really fully want to be present, even if it's for that 1 hour or half an hour in the middle of the day, in between calls and meetings, where we just know that we're there, the boundaries are clear, because honestly we're working on the same desk that we're eating on. It's the dining table,
and
we
even
also
like
work on the dining table.
setting that up, so when I clear my I'm also being more intentional, right?
Put the laptop away, and we put like a placemat out,
change the work table to a dining table, and then put the laptop in the drawer.
It's like these little rituals and routines, I think that help create kind of like your own space within a contained space, if that makes sense. So we try not to bring work into the bedroom as much as possible. Sometimes it's hard because sometimes I gotta take calls in the room because limited space. But as much as possible, we try to do our work like in the living room, in the dining table, just like away from the bed, even if like, so that space is just a place you can rest and just relax and not feel like, oh my god, I was like taking calls here today. But obviously sometimes you want to lie down, it's also okay, be human,
be
and
authentic.
Be authentic. But I think just being intentional about how we spend our time. So like we have certain non-negotiables in our day, like no matter how busy it gets, making sure we have lunch together, and knowing that if Jared's team knows not to schedule anything like around that time that we're having lunch.
Evening walk.
We take an evening walk, even if it's like we're very tired that day, right? And like honestly we've been stuck inside the whole day. It just helps us to just get outside, even if it's for 10-15 minutes, like a quick walk around the block. Helps have this like protected time. It doesn't have to be long. I think it's more about like that quality of presence and
that change of environment as well. I mean, being cooped up in an apartment all day, working as well, even if you have that protected time for lunch, it's just good to just step out and just have a change of scenery. Just for that short period of time, even if we go on a longer walk, at least we're changing our environment a little bit. Yeah.
But again, going back to the B, right, in the ABC, it's like being intentional, because it's not how much time you spend with someone. Even like when I'm calling my family back home, right, sometimes it doesn't have to be a long conversation, but it's about being fully present and the quality of your presence that I think is really what strengthens relationships. Like, Jared and I don't need to have like long conversations every day, but I know that if like we have like a 10-minute like really present like real conversation, that is so much more important than like I don't know, 2 hours of saying next to each other about me like on Instagram, like it's and not being fully there as he asks me questions, which sometimes happens. But then he'll be like, hey, and learning to just like call each other out for that. But and I think with see it and the coherence, but also celebrating something that both of us do. And I think it's been even more important in this time is, and this is, so I don't think I forgot to mention, but I have a background in positive psychology, and one of the actually the most important ways to build gratitude. Gratitude is firstly, I think one of the key things that keep ourselves and our well-being and are healthy, but it's really also the bedrock of resilience. If you can find what you're grateful for in times that it just feels like everything is not going your way, it really helps you to keep going. Even if you can be like, I'm just grateful that the sun came out today, or I'm grateful that I had a warm meal, I have a roof over my head. It just puts a lot of things into perspective over like, maybe we're all stuck at home right now, but we have access to the internet. We have aircon because Southern California very hot these last few days. Like little things like that. It doesn't need to be big things. Big things also important, but at the end of our day, some people keep gratitude journals. I've never been able to keep one up. I just don't.
We tried for a while, but
I don't do the whole I need to write it down. It feels like it became like very tiresome for me. Some people love it, but something that Jared and I do before we go to bed every night is just we ask each other what 3 good things that happened today. And no matter how bad a day you had, and if you can like come up with like, sometimes Jared had like a really rough day at work, right? And then when you take that 2 seconds before you go to bed to think about what you're grateful for, it can shift your whole perception of the day and kind of give you like a clean slate to kind of go to bed and just relax and rest and rest well. So I think for us, having that space to celebrate what's working is really important in allowing this resilience, not just internally with ourselves, but also in our relationships, to find the good in each other. It's so easy for us to kind of look at our partners or our spouse and look at everything they did wrong, or like the small things, and like but I think in learning how to appreciate these little things that they did, like, thanks for folding the laundry or doing the dishes, and I'm grateful that you did the dishes today while I was like very tired. And finding these little moments and creating part of your ritual it doesn't take a lot. It literally takes like 2 seconds before going to bed. Help to kind of plant these seeds in your garden that you're nurturing and watering and growing over years. And even though we're pretty I think compared to some other folks on this call, we're pretty early into our relationship, right? We've been together 10 years, married for 3. I'm sure some people here have been married for way longer. So we also learn a lot from Jared's parents, I think, have been a great, great role models for us, like other people that have been doing this for a long time. And just, I think, taking what works for us and putting it into practice. And so even now, I think even more so, like when I was I came to the US for high school and college, and I remember I used to call my parents as and when I remember and we will obviously, stay in touch, and I'm pretty close to my family. But I think in returning this time, we really wanted to be quite intentional about making that a regular thing, because it's so easy for life to get away with you, and for work to take precedence and all that stuff. So we try to keep it actually on a regular weekly call with our parents, sometimes individually, sometimes together. And just being able to make sure that we maintain these ties back home even while we're apart and away from each other. So I mean, I think it's just, again, the ABCs, right? Authenticity, being intentional, and coherence. Like you want it to, I think in coherence in personal relationships, right? If you feel off, people are going to feel it as well, right? And I think being coherent with, I used to worry that I always wasn't wanting to tell my parents the good things that were happening in my life, and and telling them the good news about whether it's school or work. And I realized that vulnerability and telling them what I'm struggling with also creates a greater connection, and I think allows them to feel like they can also support me, because if not, they're like, oh, okay, everything's great, yay, but I think in creating that coherence even with each other, it allows for a deeper relationship to form. And not feeling like you have to have all the answers and be perfect all the time. Absolutely. And so for me, that's something that I think we try to do. And and for each other, for ourselves, and with the relationships that we have. But again, I think, this time as we continue to stay inside, it's a great time to reflect and work on ourselves, our relationships, instead of letting COVID kind of come in as this like external thing and creating extra stresses and pressures, which are real, right? They're there, but it's not often, stress is never going to go away, right? Like I think we learned this in like mindfulness and positive psychology, but it's really our response to it that allows us to transform it, as opposed to being, a victim or being like affected by it.
Yeah,
So,
I struggled with that early on. I remember I found myself for a period of time being very resentful that COVID was happening, and I remember saying like, if COVID was a person, I would.
And we still have those days.
I want to punch it in the face, right? But like, there's no what else can I what not so much about being resigned to it, but being actually seeing it as opportunity, seeing it really as an opportunity to work on things that really matter, work on relationships that really matter. And also kind of like realize like at the end of the day, like what's important at the end of the day. And it's a good reminder.
For sure. I think that's all we have time for today. Jared and I will post, I think we can post our Instagram links in there as well if y'all want to connect.
Yeah, we would love to still stay connected and
social media and we're playing around with YouTube right now. So if you want to follow us on YouTube, we'll talk. You'll hear more of this stuff. Like we're just playing around with these things. It's a great time to experiment. Now you're at home, I think I'll hand it back to Jiezhen. We're happy to stay connected professionally and personally. We'll share our personal links in the chat. I'd love to hear in the chat if there's certain things you're taking away, things that were helpful to you. Thanks, Jez. Handing it back over to you.
That's brilliant, guys. It's so exciting. It's so cute to see both of you together, frankly. They're, especially when you both talk about professional and personal side. So covered a lot of ground today. We took some quick notes as we went along, just a quick refresh. There were the ABCs of online presence: authenticity, being intentional, as well as having that coherence. And I think today's theme was intentional. I never heard that said so many times in a conversation, but you're right. There's so much happening, and time is so precious that we just need to be super intentional or careful about what we're doing, right? So that makes a lot of sense. And then I think you had some nice Zoom tips as well in terms of lighting, front lighting, back lighting, sticker there, that was a good advice. And then I missed out the presentations. So clearly there is notions of how we do presentations, right, as well. And personally, I like to actually script out a lot of what I write and what I want to say in a PowerPoint presentation. I like to have slides, but not too many words on it. I think it helps as a little bit of a prop for me, but always the visual is helpful, I think. And that's what you guys are saying as well. Turn on the camera, right? And have that presence and consider how you look in practice. That makes sense. Virtual backgrounds, you said, all right, clean and simple, but not distracting with things moving around. That makes a lot of sense. And Jared, I'd love to have your background. So please send them to me. Please send it to me when you can. That fake office look, but I appreciate that you endorsed my screens. I got these from Walmart, so they're very affordable if anybody wants. And then, of course, use breakout.
Can we have your screens as a virtual background for some of us?
Sure, I can take a photo of my screen as well as a virtual background as well. I think Jared's lighting is fantastic. I don't know what you're doing there, Jared, but I like your lighting a lot as well. Ever since you came on, you had nice balance, right, in the screen. So you have to share with us your tips and tricks on.
One more thing on Zoom. There's actually a thing where you can touch up your appearance on Zoom. If you click on the bottom left of the arrow next to the video and you go to video settings, you can actually touch up your appearance and make your skin look very smooth.
There's an option in the settings that says touch up my appearance, and it basically removes all your
under video settings. So
that might appear.
Oh, and one more thing, glasses actually help frame your face on Zoom. So sometimes I wear contacts, but glasses help to frame your who you are, so you kind of don't blend in. But either way works.
Wouldn't it cause reflection? I'm just curious about that. What is your experience on that?
So you see Jared's
Mine has the
so I
blue
actually
filter,
have
yeah.
learned to tilt my face so it doesn't cause reflection.
So I should look.
But Jared, he has the blue light filter and stuff, but it's actually it's not bad. Like, so don't worry about wearing glasses on Zoom. You know, actually it helps sometimes, but really up to you, depending on what you want to showcase about your authentic personality.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, that's really good advice. I am taking my Zoom screen here just so that folks can kind of see that. This is it, right? Always touch up. So I just checked that. So touched up too. So in case you guys want to figure out where that function is, it's right here. And then use breakout rooms, right, to have one-on-one conversations with your participants host. That's brilliant. Thank you. Next thing is personal relationships. That was also super fascinating. Thanks for sharing the 5 languages of love. And they are words of affirmation, right? Like basically saying, I love you often, right? I think that's what you guys do. And I think you guys talk about what you guys are grateful for, which makes a big difference in that. And then acts of service. Some people don't like to say anything, just like Asian parents. They don't say anything, but they keep cooking for each other. They take out the garbage. They do the laundry. Clearly, if acts of service were something that I wanted for my husband, that might be a problem because he's not doing more than cooking for me. You know, I want him to do more things.
No, but I think it's a good point, because sometimes we expect that the way that we like to be loved is the way that we love other people, but oftentimes it's really about loving the person in the way that they want to be loved. So as I mentioned, Jared's quality time, right? So I've learned through the years that for him, spending time together is a lot more important than like a gift on his birthday. And that's what he needs. And mine is actually words of affirmation. So like, you know, when people tell me like, good job and stuff, I really like that.
Or
but
handwritten
also
notes.
my mom used to write me notes growing up in my lunchbox, and I really loved it, and it made me feel like really loved. And Jared did not go to school. Boys do not, like he went to all boys school. They did not write notes to each other, you know? Like, so over the years of us dating, like, especially this year when we were long distance, he used to like write me cards, not in his DNA at all. Like he would never go to, he probably bought, the first time he bought a card was like maybe when
but Papyrus has been a great beneficiary.
Yeah, he's a member of Papyrus
yeah.
and Paper Source now, but it's
there.
really about loving people the way they want to be loved, not the way that you like to be loved.
True. So you find a lot of guys giving girls things, and then girls are like, you know, I actually want to spend time with you. I don't want another thing from you, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's good. And then there's quality time and physical touch. So these 5 languages of love, I think, you know, it's good that you reminded me on it. So I quickly kind of pulled out something, because that's certainly something that's worked for my husband and I too. I love the whole notion of finding ways to be grateful, because in this time it's so easy to grumble. I have 3 teenagers at home, and I can tell you a list of things that are wrong in this house, according to them. And so I think it's important to have that balance as well, for, you know, what we should be grateful for, and reframing our situation, right? We could be in a terrible situation, which is what we are in. I mean, it's a crisis, right? Or we can embrace this time as a time for us to connect better. I mean, my kids feel they're cooped up with me, but also maybe we are hanging out more than we would otherwise have had. You know, when I was, you know, traveling around all the time on the road, usually I'm on the road for 80% of my time. Now I have a lot more time with them. So they have to get used to me for a while, just being at home. And now we're connecting a lot better. So I think that's an interesting touch. So I think we covered most of your questions that we're seeing online here. And we're just going to go through a quick round table with the folks. I mean, Jiezhen, Jared, anything to wrap up as we go around the horn among the organizers?
Yeah. I think just one last thing is, you know, I think resilient relationships come also with reimagining them. I think, you know, someone wrote in the chat that, you know, been working from home, and now it's like sharing the space, and like, how do we reimagine this time together? Not just in our homes, but also online, right? How do we want to reimagine the ways in which we show up professionally, but also personally? Because I think, you know, in choosing to keep things fresh, both in our jobs and in our families and in our lives, it's really choosing to show up every day. And this is something that we actually learned in our marriage prep course. Jared's Catholic, so we did this thing called Engage Encounters before we got married. And it's like, you know, they talk about how love is a choice, and you choose love every day. It's not just a feeling that comes and goes, but choosing that love, choosing to show up for each other. I think choosing to reimagine and refresh, you know, what the quality of our relationships could be, both professionally and personally, will help us feel a bit more hopeful, I think, about the time that we're in right now.
Agreed.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. I know we didn't cover things for singles today explicitly, like, where to find dating sites and how to hang out, because that's also another problem. Like, how do you date in the time of COVID, right? But that could be another session that we have another day. Someone asked me about that. And I was like, maybe that's another session for another day to cover as well. But that was an awesome session. So thank you, you both, Jiezhen and Jared. David, any parting words?
Hello. Yeah, actually, I really, really liked the presentation today. I felt that the content was rich enough that you could actually have two sessions. And I think...
Yeah, we had to squeeze it and we were like, oh!
Yeah. And I really, really like the last part where you talk about choice. So actually for me, choice is a very, very strong word for me as well, because, in this kind of circumstance, you always have a choice. You can choose to mope and blame the world about what's going on, or you can choose to do something about it and make the best of it. So I personally feel that, with this time, actually, I take it as a blessing that I had this chance to be with my kids, to be with my wife, where previously I've been running around all over the place and traveling over the place. So I choose to think of it in that light. And, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, when all this is over, we'll look back and we'll ask ourselves, how did we spend this time? And I want to say that we spend this time, super productively. We really discovered ourselves, discovered this community, and discovered more friends. As opposed to saying, well, you spend that time moping and groaning and just whining and being cooped up at home. Yeah. So that's all I want to say. Thanks so much for today, man. You're really, really good.
Thank you. Thank you again. Thanks, David. All right, Daryl, any parting words for us here?
Nothing much more, Jasmine, just to echo David's sentiments. I think a very apt topic at a time like this, in a situation like this. And I personally really like the part on the relationship part between families and friends, and at a time like this, I think it's the messages and in terms of the things that we should be thankful for, it really resonated with me. So thanks very much to our presenters for very insightful and very useful topic. Yeah, at a moment like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. And wait, just checking in. Any thoughts from your end too?
No, I'm good. Thanks a lot for sharing.
Great, and thanks for being there for us, for, with your information on the fires as well. I think Vivian also recommended we check in this app called Citizen. That's also available for fires, and that's helpful for us all as well. So thank you for that. Now, Mark, President of SingaporeConnect, any thoughts?
Well, thank you, Jiezhen and Jared. When you said the love language and I saw words of affirmation, I also thought, to me, it's like words of appreciation. Yes. So very appreciative to both of you. And actually also to Jasmine and everyone who's been helping host and give suggestions on the topics for the SingaporeConnect COVID-19 forum. I have been about 10 years of experience, I think, with SingaporeConnect. Jasmine has 20 years. I don't think in the last 10 years or 20 years, we've ever had such a series of insightful forums and range of topics that we have covered. Normally we would be probably doing a Mid-Autumn Festival this time of the year, and I think we'll probably call it, a day, right? And leave Thanksgiving and Christmas as like time to be with our family, and typically do about 5 to 7 events a year. This year has been what, a record. This is what, the 16th forum, and not to mention the National Day parade or in place event. So just want to reiterate that it definitely is a big change in how we've done things. And as to David's point, this is what COVID-19 has made out of us. Very resourceful and looking around for new ways to connect, and just looking for even more and more diverse kinds of topics that we can connect over. We actually have others in the pipeline, speakers in the pipeline coming. We certainly encourage all of you and your friends to feedback with what you like to see and recommend topics, and keep, I think we appreciate all this so very much. Back to my original point, and just get us through this. As David said, I'm not sure this will be ever gone in even 5 to 10 years, but certainly we will look back and see that we made better out of these times than just moping about it as you know, Jared, you originally thought of punching it.
Yeah.
No, and I think just one last thing on that is that, and some people have posted in the chat about resilience and well-being. We often think that resilience is an individual trait, but resilience is really found in community. And you know, positive psychology has done a lot of research on this. We always think it's like, oh, I'm individually resilient, but I think what SGConnect, SGN, all the groups that have, you know, brought us here today and have been creating these spaces, resilience is found in community and spaces like this where people can come together regardless of whether they're on SHN, in California, in the US, in Singapore. I think allow us to feel a bit more connected and a bit more grounded in a time that so much is uncertain. So I just want to thank the organizers, not just for today, but I think all the work you've been doing behind the scenes and keeping us connected and resilient during these times.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Well, we rely on all of us to contribute and collaborate, and it's thank you for stepping up in the community to share as well, Jiezhen and Jared. So we open the floor to others, you know, in subsequent weeks. If you guys have some expertise you'd love to share or topic we'd love to learn more about, you know, please let us know. As Mark said, you know, we'll look around and see how we can support each other through this process. Meanwhile, I hope you guys have a wonderful Labor Day weekend and exercise some of these, you know, personal and professional relationship skills. You know, like I think all of us are connecting now on LinkedIn, which is super exciting, and we can try to maybe connect on Facebook too. I don't know, you know, like, do we know each other yet? Is it time to do a Facebook relationship? But hopefully Jiezhen will accept us, you know, because I mean, we know she's a little bit more discreet.
Actually, I'm next to my Facebook friends, so if I don't accept you, please don't take it personally. I actually cannot add any more people.
Wow,
it's like
that.
No, it's this is like from adding real people, so I just want to put that out there because people are like, why I never accept my friend request? It's not because I don't love you, it's like it's really I cannot add more people. Instagram is good because it's got no limit.
There's no limit.
Also just a quick thing,
and now you can be
save the chat if you want to keep everyone's LinkedIn profiles. There's 3 dots in the chat box. This is a Zoom thing as well. Click on the 3 dots and then press save chat so you can add people later.
Yep, awesome. So I'm gonna keep the Zoom link open for a little bit more. I'll flash the topics that people are suggesting. If there are others that you'd like to share with us and you think that we should be having, please feel free to contribute in the chat window. Meanwhile, I think we should get our weekend started, right? And looking forward to connecting in 2 weeks with another topic that, you know, hopefully would be exciting for some of us here and as well. So good luck, everyone. Thanks again, J&J and Wukong fan. See you guys later. Bye for now.
If you post anything.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
guys. Bye, guys.
Bye.
We'll stay for a couple more minutes. Yeah.
Okay, you stay on too. Fantastic.